Welcome to Something to Say, where we bring voices from diverse backgrounds who will share their unique stories and perspectives on finding their passion and provide insights on how you can find yours. Join us as host Greg DeShields guides us through this enlightening journey.
Welcome to Something to Say podcast, a unique platform that amplifies the voices of individuals from various backgrounds sharing their passions. I'm your host, Greg DeShields, and I'm pleased to bring you another episode. Thank you for joining us. Today we feature Franne McNeal, President, Significant Business Results. Franne has helped business owners create jobs and increase revenue. She helps entrepreneurs focus their energy on action so they can achieve results. Business owners choose Franne when they want to convert ideas and opportunity into increased sales, improved cash flow, reducing expenses, and greater profitability. Franne uses a specialty assessment and a proven process to improve business by focusing on key company value drivers. She executes a customized process of one-on-one coaching, business owner mastermind classes, and VIP one-day intensive workshops. Franne earned a BA degree from Princeton University, an MBA from Eastern University, and a Master in Science, Business Research from Temple University. As a breast cancer survivor and stroke survivor, Franne's keynotes will motivate entrepreneurs. Franne has been affiliated with such premier organizations as the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Initiative, Tory Burch Foundation Women's Business Initiative, Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism, and Kaufman Fast Track. Welcome, Franne McNeal. Well, I really want to thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today. And I really am anxious to talk to you about so much and take a deep dive in the work that you do about delivering business results. And I know you've got a great reputation in that space. So you're excited for this today?
I am totally excited. I'm ready, and I've really been impressed by the way that the show has come together, the promotional efforts, and the content. So I'm honored to be a guest, and we'll live up to the expectations.
Well, so listen, everyone in our audience, in full transparency, I typically segue into discussion, acknowledging how busy the person that we are interviewing today is. And let me tell you, Franne is very busy. So constantly networking, working with business leaders, doing a great deal of travel. So I'm glad you're here. And as a part of our interviews, we always begin with what we believe are really foundational get to know you approach. It's a way for our audience to learn more about you and get a better perspective. So we're going to begin the conversation with some get to know you questions. And then from there, we'll kind of take a deeper dive into our overall conversation. So are you ready for a few get to know you questions?
I am ready.
Awesome. Hey, one more thing, audience, I should point out. This is not the first time we've done an interview. Franne interviewed
That
me
is correct.
several years ago, but I also want to thank you so much for interviewing me. That was really good.
My pleasure.
All right, so the first one is, what is your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory is actually I lived on a farm in Norristown because my mother was head of the adolescent unit at Norristown State Hospital. And so she was granted a house. And it was always horrible to say to, like folks at school, they ask, where do you live? I'm like, I live at the state hospital. They're like, okay, we're going to stay away from you. You must be the crazy girl. That was not true. But my favorite memory was being able to go out into the garden. And so we literally had like a 50-foot by 50-foot garden. And then playing in the barn because we were in a farmhouse and discovering all of the old tools, being able to climb up on the second floor, and just making that, it was like a big playhouse. And it was a lot of fun because I was the oldest of four girls, and again, just being able to be outside. During the summer, there was asparagus growing. There was a cow farm, a pig farm. So sometimes we smelled that too. But just having the open space, I got off the school bus and walked about a mile and a half, and it was just great being in that house, and discovering all the space and kind of living on a farm without having to do the work.
It's interesting when we ask that question, how impactful those childhood memories are in terms
Mhm,
of the overall quality of life that people have as they go on and they aspire in their career.
mhm.
And watching you tell that story, you could see just how, significant that was to you and how it's probably really contributed to that real positive experience that motivates you to do the kind of work that you do. So big congrats. Just
Yeah,
out of
I'm
question.
definitely a curious I'm still a curious little girl. I like to ask what and why not, and, as an adult, that still gets me in trouble.
Uh, well, we all have to ask those questions. I have to ask you a question though. So your mother, once again, what was the work that she did?
Norristown State Hospital, she was a psychiatrist, and so she graduated, from medical school in, 1961, like, right before I was born. And, yeah, it was, certainly her experience with education and focus shaped, a lot of my behaviors as well.
I
But
I
yeah.
had to draw that out because somewhere I felt that it was in your genes. Like some people you like
Yeah, yeah,
you're just
yeah.
blessed with that naturally. But really kudos to you. That's a great family story. So moving on, so what would you say was the biggest failure that you've had? And really, what did you learn from that experience?
The biggest failure was a recent one. I spent 7 years pursuing a doctorate degree at Temple. And I mean, I invested the time. I rewrote my dissertation multiple times. I really had a hard time with statistics. I, contracted with statistical tutors. I had multiple people reviewing my documents. And in the final analysis, even though the first chapter of my paper, my dissertation, I got an A. When I went up in front of the committee, my mother had just passed away, and I was like, "No, I'm gonna do my thing." And one of the committee members just like grilled me and basically said, "This isn't acceptable." And then I went back a second time, after having putting in a lot of work, time, extra money. And there was a different committee member that basically said, "This is garbage." So I went back, did some more work, got increasingly discouraged. Now, I am someone that if you tell me no, I like go into overdrive. And I contacted different people and I had different people read my paper. And in the final analysis, I just kind of stopped putting in the work. I was really discouraged. And I got it was maybe year six. You have to complete your dissertation in 7 years. And it was year six. And my committee chair said, okay, give us something that we can work with. And like I had versions that were all marked up in red. And I missed the deadline and I realized that I wasn't willing to put in the work to be rejected and that this was going to be one of the few things that I attempted and was not going to be successful at. And so, I missed another deadline. I kind of rushed and put something together, and basically the committee chair said, "We're not gonna look at it. You missed the first 2 deadlines. You're, really close to the 7-year mark. We don't think that you're going to make it." And then ultimately, I got a paper that said, "We are not going to, essentially continue. You're no longer a student." What I found interesting, and I don't know if it's money in politics, but they did offer me a master's of science in business research. And so I now have two masters, one the MBA, which I earned a long time ago, and then one I guess as a result of my doctoral work and research as a master's in science. So it was, again, I just turned 63. So, at 61, having put in 7 years and lots of dollars, it was disappointing because it was an experience. I wanted the dissertation, I wanted the doctorate degree so that as a consultant, I would have some additional options.
Mhm.
I've worked with so many entrepreneurs over the years. I've heard so many stories. I've read my share of business books. But when you look into the academic world, there are typically case studies about the really big companies,
Mhm.
and then there's a zillion of those. But there are very few case studies about minority and women-owned businesses in the what's happening with them in the under 1 million stage.
Mhm.
And that's a critical stage because less than 3% of women-owned or minority-owned businesses get to the $1 million mark. And
Mhm.
then there's very few case studies on that million to 5 million, and even that 5 million to 10 million. So while nearly 90% of small businesses are under $10 million, that's not where the case study work is for MBA students, for business students, even college students who are thinking about entrepreneurship. And so I really felt that there was a lack of research, and that's something that I wanted to address. So I've been more and more public. I was at a party recently and someone said, "Oh, did you get your doctorate degree?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And they said, "I admire that you could say that confidently." And I'm like, I have nothing to be ashamed of. I worked at it, I gave it my best. I do think there were some politics involved, but I gave it my best. And apparently, there are a lot of people who don't finish their dissertation. And in fact, there are a number of programs that exist in the country specifically for people who are all but dissertation.
Mhm.
So it is somewhat, some universities have found that a market. I just decided at this age, I'm not going to go back and pursue it. But I am working with some PhD folks to collaborate. And I did collaborate while I was in the Temple's DBA, Doctorate of Business Administration program, to have a paper published actually on about a cannabis farm in Oregon. And so that has actually led to me being able to do some teaching of entrepreneurship for people who want to get into the cannabis industry. So, not totally a lost cause, but it
Well,
was, you
you
know,
know, I
not
agree.
not
I
getting my doctorate degree was a failure. I mean, I went for something and I didn't get it.
Well, I think certainly throughout all our lives, there is that reality that we're not going to do very well at everything we do. And
Mhm,
it is about, how we take those experiences and learn from them and apply them. You've
mhm.
clearly been able to take that experience and apply it in a variety of different ways. I do have to point out, though, when you were talking about the percent of businesses below $1 million and the lack of analysis of what really happens in that stage of business. From my experience, whether it was with the Hispanic Chamber, the African American, the Asian Chamber, that's just such a common thread of minority businesses.
Mhm.
How do you, especially given how a lot will establish themselves through a variety of ways of, I hate to use the word ragtag funding, but they took out a mortgage and a credit card, or they borrowed money from friends, and kind of establishing that business to get it going. There's so much insight that could certainly benefit others who begin their journey, that could perhaps maybe move them from being less than a million to more than a million, if we knew
Right.
what are those stages. Because
Mhm.
often the biggest challenge in that stage is financing, right? And
Yeah,
like,
access to
you
capital
know,
is
it's
definitely a
access to
big one.
capital, absolutely.
It is.
And in most cases, while the spirit is there, perhaps the financial acuity doesn't exist, right? In order to kind of navigate what you could do, not to say that you're not an expert and a whiz at business, but plus minus is real. So, but I'm glad you shared that story. It is quite powerful, and I'm glad you're able to find the way to learn from that and really apply it as you go forward. And I think one other thing, yes, colleges and universities are a business after working there for 13 years. And trust me, they can put together a credential, a certificate, and accreditation that will work for anyone as long as you pay.
Yeah, I just thought it was very interesting. I'm like, oh, so you're not going to give me the doctorate degree, but you're going to slide me over into another spot so that you can say, probably in someone's statistical thing, well, we had a completion rate of X.
Right.
So I just, that was the, and
That's another podcast we should probably. But
that's fine. That's fine. I learned because of my personal investment with the statistics tutors and things like that. There were times that I would go back to the committee, they'd say, well, why don't you try this and why don't you try
Right.
that? I'd say, no, actually, I've researched and that's not a proper methodology. And they'd be like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, because I have invested time with the tutor, this theory and this process. And what I found is sometimes the committee doesn't know everything. However, it's kind of like those that have the gold rule. So that's the golden rule. The committee has the final say. And part of the process is working with the committee in a way that they want to really work with you. And I do, I don't have children, I haven't been married, but I felt like that was a relationship that was really, really draining. And once I got to that point where I just didn't have the energy to continue the fight, I now understand kind of why some people stay in bad marriages or bad situations. You kind of you want it to work, but then you realize the only way the pain is gonna stop is I've gotta get out, and
Well, on a lighter note, kind of moving on, we have one particular question that is very popular. I'm anxious to hear your thoughts. So, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be and why?
well, historical figure, I'd like to go back and talk with James Baldwin. I think he just was a very powerful figure. Um, Not because he tried to be a powerful figure, but as an individual, he had many aspects of his life. He was a black man, he was a gay man, he was a creative person, living in a world and yet dealt with facts.
Mm.
And so the way that he expressed his perspective through questions and challenges, and then his perspective was really just very powerful. And although it's like, who's the one person, I would like to then have sort of a author circle and have Sonia Sanchez in there and have Maya Angelou in there, and maybe even Phyllis Wheatley to sort of round out this. Malcolm X would be another person. He did some writing in a slightly different way, but I think there is this collective of Black male and female voices that have written in a creative way their pain, their perspective, and really contributed to laying out, I think, a foundational purpose for whether it's Black or white individuals or people of color, even in 2024 going into 2025. We're wrestling with a lot of the same issues. And I just like to, kind of pick out pieces of what they've wrote and, kind of ask questions
Right.
and tell me, what were you thinking? What were your hopes? What was frustrating you as you wrote this? And, what would your message be to people of that age? And since we have a chance to kind of, for you, go into the future and for me, go into the past, what's your message for, folks of 2030?
Hmm.
I'd love to be able to ask those questions.
Well, it sounds like the conversation would be so intense that there'd be very little food that was eaten. It would probably be one heck of an evening. It would certainly have to be all past hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah.
I want a little bit more information about your story. And one of the questions that we have asked, individuals, who are involved in leadership and have certainly kind of aspired in their career is how big is your inner circle?
Hmm. That's I'd like to give a visual, and I would say if you think about a zinnia, so it's a very specific flower, or you think about a sunflower that has all these little seeds, and the seeds are formed in a pattern, and you can pick each seed out, but each seed, once you pick out a seed for the sunflower, there's still like a, a holder, a placeholder for that seed. And a sunflower, when it really gets big, has like 300 seeds. So my inner circle, there always is that core 5, 6, 7, and that really is my family. Later, you'll ask who sort of influenced your life. My mother and father clearly made an impression, and being the oldest child, I got to spend the most sort of one-on-one time with each of them. So my 3 younger sisters, and then my aunts and uncles, because I remember my mother saying that she, slept in the same bed as her older sister, who was only 2 years older than her, because they were a family of 13. There weren't a lot of beds, and the only reason she got a single bed was when her sister got married and left the house. So, the experiences of my parents, brothers and sisters, were part of their anchor, and their parents were part of their anchor. So family is very important. And then from that, it's really business associates, folks that I've worked with. And even when I've traveled, people that I've met that I've had interesting conversations. Sometimes when you travel, you're actually more real with a stranger and they're more real with you. And you're like, oh my God, like we should stay in touch. And if you stay in touch, there's something about that. I mean, you can kind of get in their face. It's almost like a Zoom meeting. You can be so close and intimate, but really, you don't have all the old baggage. They
Right.
don't remember in high school that you cried, when you dropped your salad plate in the cafeteria or whatever. So I would say my inner circle is very tight. And like a sunflower, um, I have, these sort of 300 seeds that are circling me, because of the different ecosystems and networks that I'm part of, whether it's supporting young women who want to be confident young women. I went to a private girls' school, and so whenever I meet particularly women of color who have gone to a private girls' school, there's this instant, "How are you doing?" Because you're in an environment where people are asking you to be the best academically and to compete. And yet, as a woman of color, typically in a private girls' school, it's predominantly white. So you're facing this opportunity to think big and think broad, and yet there's still racism, sexism, whatever other isms. So in that sunflower circle, there are business associates, there are corporate people, there are folks that are clients, there are folks that are vendors. So I guess as opposed to the zinnia, the sunflower seed would be, it's a tight inner circle, that's held together by a network of seeds that themselves, if they are picked out or go away, they can bloom and blossom into something else as well. for somebody else.
I love the way that you kind of give that visual example of it. But what we've found when we ask this question, that it is, especially as people become more established in their career, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of, distinguishing those who truly are part of the inner circle that, will tell them the truth, will tell them, what needs to be heard, that may not feel good, but is in their best interest, or, uh, kind of reconfirming what you knew and
Mhm.
allowing for you to get that positive reinforcement to go even that further. So thank you for sharing that, because
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
certainly
I
found that's such an integral part as people aspire to get there.
Right.
So we did talk about, an experience that you had that perhaps wasn't very good, that you were able to learn from that experience.
Mhm.
But this question's a little bit different. What was definitively the best year of your life? And when was the worst year of your life?
Well, I think the best year of my life was when I was in Pittsburgh and I made a decision. I had actually started the MBA program at the University of Pittsburgh, and at the same time was looking for some internship opportunities and had talked to a woman that ran a software training business. And I found out that the city of Pittsburgh had an open contract for training, and what was the best year was when I, filled out the application to be a vendor for the city of Pittsburgh to provide the computer training, and I was awarded the contract. Now,
Uh,
there was some crying, there was some negotiating. I was 26 at the time. I do believe that, they quote unquote gave me the contract. I mean, it's qualified, but they gave me the contract thinking that I would fail. And, there were a lot of people, kind of checking in to see, oh gosh, did she lose it? Did she lose it? Including the person that had the contract for 3 years prior. But it was a big deal for me. I at the time had $500 in my bank account. I did not have a car. I had a bike. I did not have computers, despite needing them for the contract. And I did not have really money to buy training materials. But what I did have was a 26-year-old spirit of, I got the contract. I am going to make this
I'll make
happen.
this happen.
Who needs sleep? No problem. Went to CompUSA saying, hey, I want to buy 26 8088 computers. And they were like, sure, open up a credit card. I'm like, sure. Filled out the application, like instant rejection. And that was way back when like instant no. Went to my parents. Can I borrow money for the computers? My mother's like, you had a job at Mellon Bank. If you can't pay for the computers, we are not the bank of Franne McNeal. So I had to actually negotiate with someone saying, I've got this contract, can I, essentially put the computers in my facility? I have the contract. I'll pay every month. I made my own materials. I went to Kinko's every night, and it was just great because at the time they were still Kinko's. And
Right.
actually, in Kinko's, I ended up meeting someone who was working on their resume. I helped them with their resume. It turned out that they worked at PNC Bank, and they introduced me to the person who I actually got some contracts with PNC Bank from, one
Wow.
of which helped me pay off my student loan. Um, so that was just a great year. It was about chutzpah. It was about follow through. It was about, you know, I'm going to create the team that I need to make this happen.
Wow.
Um, and despite challenges, and so it still energizes me to this day to think, wow, you know what? There is something about not knowing how big the mountain is and just keep
Yeah,
moving forward.
absolutely. And how about the worst year?
The worst was again, I think it's the corporate. I had worked for PNC, the bank, and I'd worked for 4.5 years. And then there were a series of this is when there were a lot of bank mergers. And there was, I think they called it right sizing, downsizing. And I was downsized. And I remember having, pulling in my team, and HR had told me that someone was going to come from New Jersey. One of my team members was going to come to New Jersey thinking she was coming to my team meeting, but they were going to pull her out of a team and tell her that she didn't have a job. And I remember saying to them, why don't you just have her meet someone in New Jersey
Mm.
and tell her that she doesn't have a job, rather than having her come down here on false pretenses. And then she's going to call her husband. She's going to be in Philadelphia. She's going to take the train back. She's going to be upset. And they're like, no, this is the way we do it. So I had already seen sort of the cruel corporate world, and I was really very upset about that.
Mm.
And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I at least like to let her know. And they were like, nope, you are a corporate agent. You are not to let her know. If you let her know, we're going to fire you. So I didn't let her know. Of course, the team was like, where is so and so? And I'm like, oh, she's in a meeting. And I didn't like lying. And then I have to say, about 6 months later, I got the call from HR, and HR never calls you. And it was, oh, we're sorry to tell you, you don't have a job. And I was mad because I had just kind of gotten into the whole savings mode. And I
Mm.
knew at 5 years we were vested. And I thought, why couldn't you have waited until the
Right.
5th year? So, was that it was worse. I think, aside from what happened to me personally, I think it was worse beginning with, being part of that corporate machine that was treating people very unfairly, um, and just disrespectfully. Um, Now, I was able to, once I was laid off, it was like in March, and I ended up spending the summer volunteering for Philadelphia City Sail.
Mm.
So I took my leadership skills and was on a sailboat with kids every day, teaching them how to sail. And so that meant that Fran had to learn how to sail so that she could teach them how to sail. And we went down to Baltimore every weekend. So it ended up, again, I'm kind of, make lemonade out of
Oh,
lemons kind of
absolutely.
girl. Yeah, they
Well,
have ups and downs. Again, I was much younger, but stuff happens.
yeah,
And those were things that were, in a lot of ways, out of my control. The city contract, they could have just out and out said no. I think politically, again, they kind of, assigned me the contract expecting
right.
to snatch it back in three months. Little did they know they had picked the wrong one. So I had that contract for 3 years, and each year got better and better at it. Um,
But it's interesting, the feedback we've gotten from individuals, and they very much mirror what you've shared. They take what they've gotten from both that best year and worst year, and it continues to contribute to who they are as a person, and how they
right,
pursue their passion. And I guess I wanted to kind of move into a discussion around some of the business activity, because I know you work quite a bit with business leaders, and we've got about a half an hour left on our conversation. So I wanted to make sure we're able to pull through and still get your response to our big question at the end. But so, three questions around business activity. So, what are the most significant trends that you see are developing right now?
I think one of the obvious significant trends is artificial intelligence. And what is interesting about that is the fear and anxiety that it brings in people of all ages. I'm still involved in the academic higher ed world, and there are teachers and professors wrestling with, oh my goodness, students won't learn the basics. How will we know if students are cheating, kind of thing. Then I see people on the um, workforce side saying, oh, AI might be able to help us train people faster. And while it will replace some jobs, it will create opportunities for humans, and individuals to bring something unique to the workplace.
Mhm.
So I think, again, this combination of fear and opportunity, just kind of watching how that plays out. And then you overlay that with economic disparity that has always existed, and power moves that have always existed. And Philadelphia being a city that in some ways leans very, very heavily on the poverty statistics, and uses that to pull in a lot of money, but doesn't necessarily distribute all of that money to the folks that they're saying have the poverty. So I just think the trend of AI, the trend of fear, and the trend of how people in power and people in power perceive don't have power, deal with those emotions of fear and opportunity. And given the political climate, this could be 1955 all over again. Don't know.
Right.
But I do believe, again, when you ask about people that I'd want to speak with, I do think that there are writers in the past, whether it's, Maya Angelou or James Baldwin or Sonia Sanchez or Phyllis Wheatley, Malcolm X, that have left more than footprints in the sand for us to have questions to
Well,
ask of ourselves and those in authority. Yeah.
and then from the perspective, because I know you speak with a lot of different audiences as well as different leaders, but from your perspective and the work that you do, what would you say is a common misperception that you'd like to clear up?
Oh, I think the common misperception is that business owners can do it all by themselves. Um, they feel like they don't have enough money to hire other people. They feel embarrassed to ask for help. And those misperceptions that business is easy. I hate my job. I'm going to start a business. Actually, I'm a little bit fearful of this trend to say, oh, go out and create your own job by starting a business. First of all, if you're going to be a business owner, your business should not be your job. If you're a business owner, the business should be able to work without you, which means you have the right number of people in place, that you own the business, it's operating without you, and it is optimized for the ideal customers that you're serving. They value what you have to bring. You're able to bring in enough revenue to produce a quality product or service, to pay your people, to have a profit margin, to reinvest in your business, to get strategic partners so you don't have to do everything, and to have your business grow in value. So this misperception that, business is easy, you can start a business at any time, that being your own boss is, like, I dream of Jeannie, wiggle your nose, and, it happens.
Yeah.
That's a problem. It really is a problem. Major corporations that have not unlimited resources, but often an unfair advantage of resources, typically have 4 to 8 key leaders, executives. So whether it's the 4 legs of a chair, or the 8 sides of a stop sign, or the 8 legs of a spider, or the 8 tentacles of an octopus, a strong organization needs 4 to 8 leaders. And so we as individuals have 10 fingers, 5 on each hand. And so at minimum, if you try to operate your business with one hand, and one hand tied behind your back, which is often what happens with small businesses, it just isn't effective. And so this whole concept of, again, the misconception is business is easy. It's not. And I know being in a job might not be easy, but my advice to folks is learn what you can from the job that you're in. Build those skills, those customer service skills, those organization skills, those relationship skills, those leadership skills. because your ability to identify other potential partners, know how to negotiate, understand where your strengths are, who else needs to be on your team are absolutely critical. Running a business is not a solo sport. It's a team
No,
sport, and you got to have the right team.
I think that really aligns with what you had said in terms of what happens with those businesses below $1 million, right? Because they're doing exactly what you say not to do, because the reality of it is if we had greater analysis of how individuals even look at how they want to establish their business, there'd probably be a fair amount of data that says maybe there should be a bigger emphasis on how you're an owner, not necessarily an operator from the
Mhm,
get-go, and then
mhm.
kind of see things evolve from there. But I want to move to, two real points of discussion. I know you've been an author of two books,
Yes.
yes?
Mhm.
So can you tell us about that? I mean, the process of really spending time. I mean, we've learned about your dissertation and that sort of thing, but I mean, publishing two books is like that's no small feat either. So
Well, it isn't. And again, I think if you go back to the first edition of one of my books, Significant from Frustrated to Fantastic, you'll see inspirational stories for the entrepreneurial woman. You'll see a number of typos because, I was getting everything out of my head onto paper, coordinating with the desktop publisher, and doing self-editing and proofreading, which does not work. You need an independent person to look at it. But I think that today there are so many opportunities, whether it's at the community college level or at the Philadelphia Free Library or even short workshops on how to write a book. People have got a phone; they can use their voice recorder to kind of tell their story. They can use an app to transcribe it. So I think that if you start with the premise of what is significant or meaningful that you want to say. So, what's your point? What do you want to say? How are you going to say it? And how are you going to wrap up what you said? And then think about who cares about that topic? How will that topic help solve someone's problem or help meet a need? By bringing kind of those three things together, you can then get creative around a name and a content. And again, it doesn't have to be a solo sport. I've seen many authors start out with a journal book. So on the top of each page, there's an inspirational quote and things to write. And maybe what they've really written is a preface and a purpose for why this journal, because they want to encourage people to reflect and they want to be in front of audiences helping people to reflect. So, unlike a dissertation, which has a lot of structure, rules and regulations, and there are handbooks on that change every year, along with the APA, edition of whatever.
right.
I think that writing a book, at least that first draft, or that first chapter can be something that you offer as a challenge to yourself, and then go out and get the support. There's someone locally in Philadelphia, a Black woman that does workshops to help people write their book. And she does retreats, and she's just a ball of energy. And so, there's lots of resources out there. But the book that I most frequently am asked about is called Significant from Frustrated to Fantastic. And that came about because when Sheryl Sandberg wrote her book, Lean In, one of the things she did is she asked or encouraged groups of women to create circles, lean in circles, and basically learn about a topic like negotiation. And in that circle, share their experiences. And on her website, she asked people to write no more than 500 words about a time when they leaned in. And I wrote a story about when I was in the hospital, paralyzed for 2 weeks as a result of breast cancer, chemotherapy, and then the stroke. It was the blood clots that from the chemotherapy that gave me a stroke. And I was paralyzed for 2 weeks. And being the oldest of four girls, used to telling people what to do and suddenly being immobile, and having someone wipe my butt, when I had to go to the bathroom, I'm like, I'm not having this. But like I couldn't really move to go, I'm not having this. I could talk, but I really couldn't move. And the doctor told me, focus on wiggling your fingers and wiggling your toes. And so that was my work while I was immobile. And I remember finally one day I could wiggle my toes. And then, of course, I told the nurse, who was like, okay, can I just have your, arm for blood pressure? Like she was totally unimpressed. And I thought, bad customer service. Patient is speaking. This is an opportunity to be supportive. But in writing that article for Lean In, which was published, it gave me this idea that writing a series, and it ended up being 20 short scenarios, about 500 to 1,500 words, and then providing questions for people was a way that I could encourage people to read about someone else's life or situation and then think about their own life, and in small groups talk about it and share and get to know each other. And my premise is that we're all significant. It's just a matter of stepping up and finding that.
Wow, very cool. Well, so we're approaching the end of our conversation. I need to have you come back and do a second episode, but
Sure.
our podcast is entitled Something to Say. So, in the remaining few minutes that we have, so what do you have to say?
So, what I have to say is to each and every person out there, number one, you are significant. And significant is a word actually people have trouble spelling. So, think of it as sign, SIGN, if, IF, I can, and then the T I like to think of as trust. So you are significant if you begin to trust in yourself. Find that voice, no matter how small. Find that success story, no matter how small, and bring that to the forefront of your experience. So you could be in the middle of a storm, but what's that one limb that you're hanging on to that's there for you to hang on to? You could be in quicksand, but what's that one little piece of rope that allows you to be still and not wiggle and get further down? So finding where you are significant, finding the people around you that allow you to validate yourself, speak your truth, and then really beginning to negotiate not so much with others, but negotiate with yourself to say, I am worthy, I am important, I have something to contribute, and I am significant. And in a lot of ways, that's the work that I've always done, whether it's in corporate training or being a business coach, or in the work that I do now with businesses that are in that $1 to $10 million range. I help them find, and that's why I named my company what I named it, significant business results. I help them identify something that's really important at the top of that mountain that probably is far away in the distance and say, that's what I want to focus on. And how can I, like the Chinese proverb, take that one step of 1,000-step journey? And in doing so, people have the opportunity to be supported, to be encouraged, and also be held accountable. Because remember, I am the oldest of 4 girls. I'm used to telling people what to do, and it's okay if people say, no, I'm not going to listen. If you've paid me to support you, you will be held accountable. And that's a good thing because you get results. So,
Wow.
and
Well,
and and that sort of Philly girl love.
yeah. Well, Fran, I want to thank you so much for sharing your passion, your insights. I knew that we'd get a lot of information that not just our old, but some of our new listeners will benefit from. And your words are truly, truly impactful and very important. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So that's a wrap for this episode of Something to Say podcasts with another inspiring conversation from voices of individuals who have diverse backgrounds that share their really insightful passions. So until next time, this is Greg DeShields.
Thank you for tuning in to Something to Say. We trust you found some valuable insights and takeaways that can help you find your passion. Don't miss out on future episodes. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred platform. We value your feedback and suggestions, so let us know how we can serve you better. Keep the conversation going and stay inspired until we meet again. Take care and happy listening.